I'm pretty bullish on some kind of national dissolution, peaceful divorce, national divorce, civil war, whatever. And
you're bullish on civil war.
Yeah, like I don't mean to say that's something I want to happen.
Something you want. Oh, you're saying that you're thinking the likelihood of it. Okay,
yeah, I'm looking at it like, wow, that's going to happen.
Okay.
And it's crazy that there's been a lot of things that, Jack Murphy likes to mention this. It was last year in January, we had a conversation about a lot of things, and we predicted a bunch of stuff that was going to happen based on what we were seeing. And I remember Jack hitting me up being like, dude, you need to go back and watch the episode we did. It was like the first guest we ever had.
Oh, yeah.
And he was like, we predicted a lot. I was like, really? And he's like, yeah, dude. And I was like, wow. So I see these things in media, and I think one of the things about it, there are a lot of people who tell me I'm crazy for bringing it up, but now it's starting to change. Man, I thought it was so funny. I'm not afraid to speak my mind and give my opinions, even if people think they're dumb. Like when I was like, I didn't like Dune. Everyone's like, you're insane. Dune's the greatest movie. I'm like, I don't care if I feel a way, I'll say it. Back in the day when I used to talk about Civil War, people would be like, you're nuts. It'll never happen. Now I have people being like, so you've been talking about Civil War. Like I did Russell Brand's podcast, and he's like, yeah, you said Civil War. And then I go through all the details. We had a shooting in Pacific Northwest. Let me show you this story so you can explain, so you can understand how I feel. This is a tweet from Max Blumenthal. He's a leftist, and it's from a show, Primo Radical. He says, Noam Chomsky doubles down on his previous call for the state to segregate the unvaccinated from society. Quote, how can we get food to them? Well, that's actually their problem. Let me play this video.
When you talk about folks having the freedom to separate if they don't want to abide by these vaccine mandates, what would that look like on a practical level? Does that mean that folks need to just stay home and have like groceries delivered to them? Does it mean like separated communities of folks who are unvaccinated, or just, how do you think this would practically play out?
Same way as with people who say that I don't want to accept traffic rules. I suppose there were people who said it's an attack on my liberty to make me stop at a red light. It's government overreach. We don't want the state to have that power over my private life. Well, such people they should have the decency to remove themselves from the community. If they refuse to do that, then measures have to be taken to safeguard the community from them. Then comes the practical question that you ask, how can we get food to them? Well, that's actually their problem. Of course, if they really become destitute, then yes, you'd have to move in with some measure to secure their survival, just as you do with people in jail, for example.
So there you go. This is Noam Chomsky. He is a prominent figure on the left. That's why they interview him. And this had to be probably the most infuriating thing I've ever heard, but at least Noam Chomsky has become senile enough to admit what they want to do. It's not about vaccines. It's about mandate. You saw him talk about traffic laws.
Yeah.
Yeah. If someone blew a stop sign, are we going to put them in a camp and then deliver food to them? No. But think about what he's saying. The same thing that happens if someone refuses to abide by traffic laws. Yeah, they get a slap on the wrist. They get a $20 ticket, and they're told to go home. So when I brought up vaccine mandates, I tweeted this. I said, the left tries claiming that vaccine mandates have been around forever. Weird. I don't recall being carded for my medical information entering a bar before, but if you say so. And then in come the leftists being like, all of these mandates for like smallpox. Smallpox mandate. Supreme Court ruling, 1905. It was the Jacobson ruling, I believe it was called. It was over a $5 fine. The guy didn't want to pay the equivalent of $150 for not getting the vaccine. They didn't say you weren't allowed to go to restaurants. They didn't say to stay home. They didn't say we were going to segregate you from society. They didn't say we were going to cut you off from food. They said, pay about $150 and you're done. And he said, no, took him to court. The court said, you know what? They can fine you over this. And that was it. And from that ruling, we got, I think it was it the Beck ruling? In 1927, where they ended up sterilizing 70,000 women because they used the justification of government-mandated medical procedures to sterilize people the state deemed imbeciles. So when you see Noam Chomsky say, segregate these people from society, and if they want food, that's their problem, I hope you're paying attention to what prominent leftist figures are saying they want to do to your kids. Then don't come to me and say, but Tim, I can't stand up for my rights. My kids need food. Congratulations. When you don't, Noam Chomsky's going to come and take it away.
And it's not just Chomsky. It's not just commentators. It's world leaders, like the Prime Minister of New Zealand that was asked directly, are you creating a two-class society of people who are vaxxed and unvaxxed with special privileges for the ones that are vaxxed? She responded resoundingly, yep. And that's what they're literally doing and implementing as far as policies here, and we have to be made aware of that.
So plagues have been a major thing in human history, and there actually is this like extensive legal tradition of the state having extraordinary powers in the time of plague to do all kinds of things for quarantines and all this other stuff. But that was back again when you're talking about smallpox pre-vaccine, that like, you know, people were like dying in the streets with open sores and like was incredibly contagious, that was, you know, killing, you know, 3/4 of entire towns. Like the survivability rate of COVID is, you know, extremely high, and they're treating this like it's, you know, again, smallpox pre-vaccine. I mean, it never has justified these kinds of draconian measures.
Well, Ian brought up a really good point recently when he asked us about the, you know, where the line is in terms of vaccine mandates. And I was like, I don't think what we're seeing warrants the kind of mandates they're doing. And then Ian was like, okay, so but if it's Ebola, then their rights be damned. And I was like, it's a good point. You're like airborne Ebola. It's aerosolized and people's insides are liquefying and they're dying. And then I was just like, you know, I think about it and I'm still like, then you should isolate yourself from everyone else if you don't want to take those risks, which brings me back to the original ruling that the left tries to cite. And I'll say two things. One, they said, if you don't get the vaccine, it is a $5 fine.
Yeah.
Just like if you blow a red light, they say it is a $50 ticket. $5 back then was about $150 now, as I stated. So for Noam Chomsky to say the same thing that happens. The other thing they bring up is schools, MMR vaccines. Yeah, if I want to go to McDonald's for a cheeseburger, I don't have to present my cards because of schools.
Yeah.
Still something completely different. But my greater point was, if they're openly saying, if we have the power, we will do this to you, then the only outcome I see this. I see two groups of people pointing the finger saying, live by my rules or else. Technically, it's not true. The right tends to be saying, leave me the F alone. And the left says, shut your goddamn mouth. We are going to lock you up if we have to.
There's also a lot of pushback against Chomsky, against his point of view here. One person writes, glad I was able to learn a lot from reading and watching Chomsky, and glad I was smart enough to learn when it was time to stop listening to Chomsky. Another person just chatted here also. Noam Chomsky is the Grinch who stole liberty, and I would have to agree with that person.
This is my entire life. It's insane. People have been following Noam Chomsky around, transcribing his every utterance. Like literally, that's what they do with him. And the only other figure in human history I can think of where they did this was Jesus Christ. Right. And he is not Jesus Christ. I mean, like he's said so many like dumb and ill-considered things over the years. I think he happens to have said some interesting things over the years. What he was saying about corporate media in the 80s was interesting. Yeah. But, you know, he's spouted off on so many topics over the years that go so far beyond his quote-unquote domain of linguistics or whatever it is, that the fact that we're still listening to him at this point in time, never mind that he's saying things that are terrifyingly authoritarian.
But let's think about what he's saying. When he says we would need to take measures to protect society from the people who won't get vaccinated, he is operating under the assumption that he is society, that he controls it, and that it's his. It's not true. So here's what I posted. When he said, the food, actually, that's their problem. No, actually, that's your problem. Farmers support Trump, 85-12.
Oh, boy.
Truckers support Trump, 10-1. So if you think you're going to isolate these people from society and then you will be trying to be the nice person to figure out how to feed them, you're sorely mistaken.
Yeah.
You'll isolate the people who bring the food to your city, and then they'll give you the finger, and you'll say, but wait, I'm hungry.
Let's not sugarcoat it. He's calling for camps. He's calling for people to be relocated outside of society, outside of their homes, put into special facilities
where they are concentrated. And then we would ensure their survivability, much like jail.
Australia is already building camps for 2020 and 2022 and 2023. They're still building even more on top of that. So this is not even in the realm of conspiracies. This is not only just being talked about by Chomsky. This is being activated in parts of the world right now where they have camps for people who don't comply. The CDC director just came out today and said that she has a plan for unvaxxed government employees and police, and it's to re-educate and to provide counseling for them. She said specifically, quote, "There's a plan should these people not want to be vaxxed." What's the plan? What's the exact details? She didn't really get into all of that.
If you're using the word re-educate unironically, I mean, you're the bad person.
You see that New Zealand Prime Minister lady?
Yeah, no, I saw that.
When she was asked by a reporter, "Are you going to be creating two classes of people?" "Yes, that's exactly what we're doing."
Yes,
I think it's cool.
They're not even hiding it.
No,
They're so emboldened by the mainstream media cheering them up and blowing smoke up their tuchuses. Family-friendly show. I would have said something else.
Let's also not forget that they're shifting the definition of what's vaxxed now.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden it's going to include, you don't have your 7th booster for the, Omicron.
Just like they shifted the definition for herd immunity as well. They slowly and surely destroy the language.
University of Denver flu vaccine mandate.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just so astounded that we as a species can make so many movies, books, shorts about apocalyptic futures and nightmare dystopias, and right now we're living in one, and people are like, this is fine. Seeing that story about Noam Chomsky, and then seeing people, high-profile blue check marks, agreeing with him, you realize who the Nazis would have been.
Well, there's also something here, which is just that our culture is so empty and devoid of meaning here. Now, look, I'm just speaking as a Christian. I live for things other than what my government does on a day-to-day business, on a day-to-day basis. But the fact that these people are, the number one thing that they're afraid of is just dying constantly. You know what? I'm not afraid of dying. I'm especially not afraid of dying for something I believe in. And once upon a time, that was the dominant attitude in America. People had things they were willing to die for.
That's a really interesting thing. You maybe just realize something. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of not living. Mm-hmm. So for me, when they say things like, you have to live in a cubicle, locked down, you can't go outside, people would rather not live but be alive. I'm the other way around. I would rather risk my life in order to live.
Right. Well, look, they're going to get to live in Mark Zuckerberg's metaverse or whatever it is. Whatever VR goggles they bolt to your head.
And their beautiful pod.
The people are going to gleefully enter the Matrix.
Some of them are.
Well, but that's the classic Huxley-Orwell distinction, right?
Yeah.
I mean, everyone always quotes Orwell, but the reality is Huxley probably got it more right than Orwell.
Yeah.
We're all going to sleepwalk into this because it seems like the fun thing to do.
I actually think Luke got it more right.
Revenge of the Nerds or the other one?
The You Are Here shirt.
Yeah. Well,
the shirt with all of the dystopian novels, and we're in between all of them. Mm-hmm. Because it is government overreach, but it is the pleasurification. It also is the censorship, like Fahrenheit. It also is V for Vendetta.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the funniest part of it.
Very accurately, there's so many things in those movies that are playing out in true life. It's kind of awe-stunning.
Why are we so good at predicting all of this, but so terrible at reacting to any of it?
And why do people cheer on the people fighting against the big tyrannical governments and corporatists, but yet and in the real world they're cheering them on?
Julian Assange, but then Trump was like, I don't know who Julian Assange is.
Well, this is my favorite point to make about the original Star Wars, A New Hope. I always ask people, you're a fan of Star Wars?
Yeah, sure.
You like A New Hope?
The original one, yeah.
Yeah, like the very first
the original trilogy, yeah.
You think a story about a bunch of religious zealots who come from a desert, take a cargo plane, and blow up a military base is a cool story?
I mean, I guess, but I was also raised Mormon, so. But
perspective is the
exactly. So my former colleague Jonathan Lass is the guy that wrote the famous essay about how the Empire were actually the good guys, right? That got a lot of traction back in the day. Yeah, I mean, I totally see where you're coming from with that.
I'd love to do a series of short films, villains as the good guys. So we could do a ton of different movies and do like a 5-minute short film where it just breaks down, does like a quick, overview of the bad guy's actually the good guy. And
Darth is like, I tried for so long.
Just like Luke. Just like that Karate Kid video on YouTube that describes Karate Kid, but in a totally different light and perspective.
Right. But they made a show about it.
Yeah.
And Cobra Kai, basically. Yeah. But Darth Vader, he's a disabled veteran, bro.
There you go.
He's a war hero of the Clone Wars.
If you joke about it enough, it just may come true.
There was a galactic civil war, and he lost his limbs fighting against religious zealots to save, what the government in shambles. Now, of course, we know the Emperor was secretly fomenting all of this stuff. That's besides the point. Darth wasn't in on it.
Well, Mark
He was a
asked the
tool.
question why we're so good at like coming up with these stories, but we're so bad at reacting to them. And I think that is because people who create art have a much deeper understanding of human nature than the people who make our policies. Because looking at the way Democrats are trying to handle this pandemic, they are assuming that people are going to go along with them if they force them to do it. Like, have you ever met an American? That is not a good way to get an American to do anything, but they're trying.
Look at these protests in
Yeah.
New York. Have you seen these crossing the bridge chanting "Let's go, Brandon"?
Exactly.
And the day before that, the Kyrie Irving protest outside
Yeah.
of
Right.
the Barclays Center, where they stormed in to try to get into the Barclays Center, and they pretty much had a lot of people out there, all chanting "Let Kyrie play."
I'm glad the fight in this country isn't dead. But having said that, I don't know. Maybe this is my age and stature talking, as it were. But I have a feeling that even 25 years ago, so much of what we're seeing would have been a non-starter.
Yeah.
And not just because of the technological stuff that enables this, but simply because the cultural attitudes were like so much stronger in terms of.
And people were stronger, healthier, happier, and had more families. And now we have a lot less of that.
But then all of the mainstream stuff would have been put on ABC, and it would have been fact. We would have thought, oh, millions of people have been this and that, and like all this.
No, he's right.
Vietnam War. I mean, there was huge pushback
But that was
against
they
that.
realized the mistake. They realized the mistake they made by putting cameras there, so they didn't do it for the first Iraq War. They decided not to
course.
show the
That's-
doors
I'm-
getting
Yep.
kicked in.
In the first Iraq War in the 90s?
Yeah, they showed like a news reporter sitting on a tank driving through the desert, but they didn't show like kids getting mowed down in their houses and stuff as the soldiers were kicking the doors in, and white phosphorus.
There was an age of muckraking journalism
melting
that
skin.
did make a big impact. But it's hard to kind of weigh these things. It's hard to really assess them by not living through them and only having the reports from what happened of the reports, not the actual events. So it's hard to say exactly what was the lynch point, if it was the media, if not. And I think it's impossible to answer those questions.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to watch live, you can check out this channel Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Now, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, and if you want more unfiltered and uncensored content with all of these guests, go to timcast.com and become a member. All of these guests you know and love in exclusive segments on our website where we are unrestricted in what we talk about, so you'll definitely not want to miss it. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all next time.